From year to year, month to month, week to week, and day to day, people across the world are obsessed with a phenomenon that is professional wrestling. But why? 101 reasons to love professional wrestling. There are many components of professional wrestling that should be both understood and celebrated, in no particular order.
Misting, powder, and fire. There will always be someone who has a moral compass that does not align with the rest of us. We know of many examples of someone being caught, but for every person caught cheating, there is an uncomfortable amount of those who aren't. When you do take a moment to ponder, they seek a mischievous way to have the upper hand. And this happens in all facets of life. It occurs in business, in video games, and sports. It's not ethical, moral, or fair, but it happens. You just keep playing that game. You work hard. You overcome all obstacles. You do what you have to do to survive, even if it is an underhanded surprise. One common way to surprise an opponent in a schoolyard fight is grabbing a handful of dirt and throwing it at your foe's unexpected eyes. If there is a way to depict a good fight, then it is only natural that pro wrestling would put their spin on it. In wrestling, there typically isn't dirt at ringside to use to one's advantage, but there are a few devices that have found their way into the annals of the art. Throwing an illegal object at someone's eyes is just one of many ways a heel will cheat to win or take out their enemy. Normally, these devices come in three popular forms: a misting of some type of poisonous liquid, throwing powder, or in some vicious cases, throwing fire. All to the eyes. There are many people to use these contraptions in their matches, but only a few have absorbed these tactics as part of their legacy. Inspired by an artistic theater style of the same name, the Great Kabuki was a mysterious Asian character that is credited as the first to use the idea of spitting mist at their opponent. The Great Muta and Tajiri carried on this tradition with class and awe. Others like Gangrel, Luna Vachon, or even Hornswoggle have put their spin on the attack. It is not often applied, but there is even a lore about what each mist color means. For instance, the classic green is used to merely obstruct vision, but black will blind someone for weeks. Blue will put someone to sleep, and so on. Powder to the eyes is also associated with another Hall of Famer in Yokozuna. When Yoko was in jeopardy, he would be aided by his evil manager, Mr. Fuji, who would launch ceremonial salt into the eyes of the opponent. Fuji would use this cheat with other people he managed, and even as a wrestler himself in the 1970s. This type of attack goes back a while in the timeline of wrestling. Masa Sato would use this heel tactic to become one of the most hated wrestlers of his time. Jerry the King Lawler and many others would toss salt or powder to take over the upper hand in a fight. Fire is one of the most dangerous elements in play. In rare and crazy moments, someone will throw fire into the face of their adversary. There have been a few notable fireball moments to the face. One of our most primal lessons learned is that fire is in fact hot. So when wrestling fans see it used as an attack on someone's face, it definitely stands out. There have been examples of this not going as planned, but this trope is simple. The wrestler uses a flash paper and a lighter. The flash paper burns up in, not surprisingly, a flash. When it is done correctly, the illusion tells a story of extreme pain. Some wrestlers will attack their enemy with a chair, or a ladder, or a cane, or by throwing them through a table. It takes a special breed of monster to go for the eyes. If one cannot see, it makes it rather difficult to defend themselves. The victims are then left to fend off an attack from any direction the attacker chooses. It's unfair, it's cheap, it's downright heinous. It's also a visual you'll never forget. Whatever your poison, it is always a next day talking point when someone is blasted in the eyes with mist, powder, or fire. Royalty. Hail to the king. The concept of royalty is known by all. It's the folks at the top of the food chain, the rulers, and the celebrated. Originating with the feudal systems of medieval Europe, it has always been about power. It's those who have power due to owning land, having the most riches, and through a long line of nepotism. This would carry on all the way through into modern times. The idea of a king or queen or king of queens is also a gimmick used in marketing. Michael Jackson was the king of pop. American jazz performer Benny Goodman was the king of swing. And of course, lions have been given the title of king of the jungle. It is status. It is a special acclaim. It is being the top of a hierarchy. In professional wrestling, the performed hierarchy definitely has its share of royalty. There have been many a men and women to wear a crown and lay claim to being king or queen. Some wrestlers actually earned their moniker. The WWE's King of the Ring tournament has gone from an annual pay-per-view to a random attraction in recent years. This has both made and rejuvenated careers. Owen Hart used his victory to proclaim himself as the King of Hearts. The jealousy over the throne was the reason Edge and Christian's long-running tag team broke up. The rap-friendly Mabel would become King Mabel and found himself in a bigger role on the card. There are those like Baron Corbin who won the tournament and rode the character out without much career advancement. Then there are the likes of Booker T, who would take the crown and totally fade in to an awesome character of royalty. Others just pretty much call themselves the king. Jerry the King Lawler was not the only king in wrestling history. The likes of King Curtis Ayakea, Jackie Fargo, King Haku, the Macho King Randy Savage, King of the Mountain Jeff Jarrett, and numerous other barons, dukes, and princes. This is essentially just another type of gimmick or character in the toy box of wrestling. Some wrestlers do wear silly costumes. Some of those include royal attire. Still, it becomes a status that the owner does not want to lose. They work hard to maintain their royalty, earned or just given. It's been said before and it'll be said again. In professional wrestling, heavy is the head that wears the crown. Rebellion. It is a natural urge to disobey authority. We do not like listening to mean parents, mean teachers, and mean bosses. Even if they do know better, we don't want to listen because we are the ones who really know better. As we grow up, these are either lessons learned or moments to be proud of, maybe both. There are still bad apples that spoil the bunch. They rebel by breaking the law and hurting people. Most folks walk the fine line and blend into the system, but some just like sticking it to the man. These are the problem makers, the disruptors, and the rebels. In movies and television, shows that feature the anti-hero are a long part of its celebrated history. We laugh at and with Archie Bunker, Al Bundy, and George Jefferson. We were enthralled by the storylines and characters like Walter White from Breaking Bad or Omar from The Wire. The world of professional wrestling is full of anti-heroes who have not been shy to showcase rebellion. Professional wrestling's storytelling foundation is built on good guys versus bad guys. Fans cheer the good guys on as they live out the fantasy of defeating the evil bad guys. Sometimes this recipe does not meet the taste of the audience. The fans of wrestling will find a reason to cheer on the heel. These larger-than-life anti-heroes rebel against the norm and the authority of wrestling. It could be a simple attack on the referee, but there are many examples of great rebellion. Stone Cold Steve Austin would rebel against Vince McMahon. Generation X would also rebel against Vince. The NWO rebelled against WCW. It goes on and on. If there is authority, there is someone rebelling against it. In wrestling, the authority represents the jerky boss, the stern teacher, and every attribute a normal person would dislike. In the real world, we swallow our pride and keep going because we need our grades, we need our jobs, and we depend on the system that the authority figure is in charge of. Stone Cold didn't swallow his pride. He got the best of his boss every week for our amusement. D-Generation X and New World Order definitely didn't either. They took a more sophomoric approach, but it was rebellion all the same. Eventually, everyone likes the bad guy. Iron Man matches. Of course, all comic book fans and most of the population by now know of the superhero known as Iron Man. Created by Stan Lee in 1963, Tony Stark was born as a new Marvel Comics icon. One of Black Sabbath's and all of rock music's best songs of all time is indeed Iron Man. Recorded in 1970, released in 1971, Ozzy Osbourne, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward would unleash one of the catchiest and rawest heavy metal songs of all time. There is Cal Ripken Jr., known as the Iron Man, because of his insanely long streak of never missing a Major League Baseball game, breaking Lou Gehrig's record of 2,130 games seemed unbreakable, until this Hall of Famer broke the streak and surpassed it with 2,632 consecutive games played. The term Iron Man is often associated with the idea that someone has showcased a feat of endurance and defeated all odds. Then they do it again and again, maintaining the reputation of being someone who excels. Professional wrestling has its fair share of tests of endurance. The most common form of this is the classic Iron Man match. Two or even more opponents face off for a set amount of time, often 30 or 60 minutes, and whoever has the most wins at the end is declared the victor. Time is money. Commercials need to air, and promoters need to get on at least a decent amount of wrestlers on every card. Thus, the Iron Man match is reserved for oh-so-special occasions. The origins of the Iron Man match are debatable. Wrestling matches going back to the carnival days were long and brutal. Sometimes these bouts would be best out of 3 falls. Sometimes 2 performers would just go Broadway. Going Broadway is the backstage term for a match that goes for an hour, often with indecisive or controversial results. But the most wins in a certain time frame construct of an Iron Man match started off under the aptly named Marathon Match. The earliest on record were untelevised tag matches between the Rockers and the Fabulous Rougeau brothers. These would go an hour, with the Rockers winning the half dozen or so of these spread out matches during the WWF tour of 1989. WCW would adopt the match idea as well. In 1992 and 1993, Rick Rude would compete in 2 of these matches against Ricky Steamboat and Dustin Rhodes, respectively. In 1993, Bret the Hitman Hart would win his first WWF World title via an Iron Man match against Nature Boy Ric Flair. In 94, Bret Hart would defeat his brother Owen in a handful of house show matches that featured 60-minute Iron Man bouts. However, it would be WrestleMania 12 to put this match on the map. Bret Hart would take on Shawn Michaels in a 60-minute Iron Man match that main evented one of the biggest shows of all time. It would take an overtime, but the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels would realize his boyhood dream as he finally captured the beloved Winged Eagle version of the WWF World title. From there, every few years, illustrious Iron Man matches would pop up when rivalries were heated enough. Triple H and The Rock would square off in one at Judgment Day in 2000. Brock Lesnar and Kurt Angle had one on free television at a SmackDown in 2003. Kurt Angle and Shawn Michaels ran a 30-minute Iron Man on Raw in 2005. John Cena and Randy Orton had one at Bragging Rights in 2009. The most notable of recent Iron Man matches was in NXT as Bayley defeated Sasha Banks at NXT TakeOver Respect. It was only a 30-minute match, but is heralded as one of the best female matches in WWE history. Rightfully so, it was amazing. So many of these mentioned Iron Man matches and many others were also amazing. These matches are not exclusive to WWE. Tony Deppen and Jordan Oliver had a great Iron Man match at a GCW event in early 2021, and this Iron Man match went 2 hours. Deppen would also take on Trish Adora in 2021 for an intergender Iron match presented by Pro Wrestling Illustrated. While it's not as common as a ladder or cage match, these bouts still happen. When they do, it's best to just sit back and enjoy the ride. To be a professional wrestler, one must be ready for anything and endure physical hell, all for the love of wrestling. But an Iron Man match is a totally different level of endurance. You have to be ready to go the distance. Signs in the crowd. When people gather, some want to stand out and be noticed. When rabid sports fans go to games, they wave flags, towels, and other items to support their team. Some even bring signs. Political rallies see crowds of party line supporters get loud and cheer on their selective candidates. And they bring signs as well. Protest over causes see crowds of like-minded people gathering to make their voice heard. They have signs too. People like getting and giving attention, and those people include professional wrestling fans. Wrestling fans have followed the trends of everyone else that gathers crowds, and have brought homemade signs to the show. In the earliest days, it was simple and fun. Kayfabe was alive and well, with signs rooting for the good guys and jeering the jerks on the show. we would see fans hold up signs for Hulkamania and other 80s icons. These signs were as innocent as the times. As time went on, pop culture changed. It got edgier and a lot more snarky. Signs got a bit more raunchy. They got a little more off topic. They started promoting themselves. They got a bit more rude and offensive. The signs encompassed insider terms and complained about the shows on a more behind-the-scenes level. In more recent years, they've started ongoing debates, like about video game preferences. Some would say the best signs are the ones that go a few seats into the row of fans that all collaborate to deliver a message. Whatever that message is, a sign in a crowd is part of the show. This is just another part of the bond that a fan has with the product. Someone was so excited about going to the show that they pulled out some poster board, markers, and put their perspective out there for the world to see. Podcast. Everyone has things that they're interested in. It could be a hobby to occupy your time, a cultural ritual, or just an escape from reality. With that, the fans of these things absorb as much as they can about said topic. Comic book fans, sports nuts, and religious folks all have their lineages, statistics, lore, and behind-the-scenes news. In older times, word of mouth and then books would be our source of information. Then radio and television opened doors to sensory overload. The next logical step in the progress of information has been podcast. Professional wrestling fandom is as fanatical as any comic book, sports, or religious following. And the fans, they want to know everything. Before podcast, the insider information that wrestling fans craved came from magazines that were outdated by the time they hit newsstands, overrated newsletters written by so-called experts, and then low-quality shoot interviews that would be swapped by VHS collectors. Podcast in wrestling would change this. Information from behind the curtain would be available weekly and even daily by fans, reporters, and even the wrestlers themselves. Colt Boom Boom Cabana's The Art of Wrestling was one of the first of these recorded shows in 2010. Getting the perspective of a respected wrestler, sharing their experiences, and speaking to others was groundbreaking at the time. Numerous other wrestlers from the past and present now have their own podcast. Some even group together under network umbrellas. Bruce Pritchard, Jeff Jarrett, Eric Bischoff, and others all release weekly shows for Conrad Thompson's AdFreeShows.com network. Vince Russo has his own thing, as does numerous others. Even the WWE has delved into the world of podcast-style interview shows. The very people responsible for the memories and moments in the ring, from backstage or even running the show, now share stories from the past, clear up lies, and present their own personal perspective on events occurred. It's also the current events. Virtually every pro wrestling news site also has podcasts in both audio and video form. Virtually every televised and big wrestling show has dozens of review and recap shows by media and fans alike, moments after ending. Interviews with wrestlers are dropped every day without fans having to wait on a fourth-generation copy of a VHS shoot tape. If something big happens, it is only a matter of minutes before someone is on YouTube sharing the news and their take on the situation. Technology has and will continue to evolve, but a professional wrestling fan's desire for information, content, and detail is something they're always going to subscribe to. Pop culture pop-ups. Pop culture is a wide scope and combination of the arts, trends, and flavors of the month. Since the beginning of television, famous people who were not actors would pop up. Iconic baseball players and other sports stars would be heralded with the same acclaim and fame as anyone else at the top of people's collective minds. This goes from Los Angeles Dodger pitcher Don Drysdale showing up on Leave It to Beaver, to the Monkees singer Davy Jones popping up on The Brady Bunch. Stevie Wonder could be seen on The Cosby Show. Muhammad Ali made an appearance on Different Strokes. Sammy Davis Jr. made history on All in the Family. Since its incarnation, hundreds of well-known celebrities have lent their voice to The Simpsons. First Lady Michelle Obama even popped up on an episode of iCarly. There are numerous examples of these type of appearances. It's fun for fans of these folks to see them on other shows. The cross-contamination of celebrity, of the arts, and of entertainment is a great way to achieve synergy between everything that is pop culture. Some doors are harder to open and definitely more rare to see occur. Professional wrestling is many things, and niche is one of them. So it's always exciting for fans when there are pop culture pop-ups. Despite the millions of fans, primetime television placement, and the amazing talent of the performers, the world of wrestling is often on the outskirts of mainstream entertainment. Some performers bring crossover appeal by coming to wrestling from other fields. Since wrestling's earliest days, other athletes have had notable careers. Other outsiders have dipped their toes in for big events or to participate in a storyline. But in rare cases, this is reversed. The Rock Dwayne Johnson is one of the biggest Hollywood stars of all time. Dave Bautista has been in some of the biggest movies of recent years. John Cena has and is making his own imprint in film as well. In the 1980s, Hulk Hogan was so popular that he starred in a handful of not so popular, but pretty memorable movies. Chris Jericho has hosted things, popped up in movies, and is a singer in a rock band. Jesse the Body Ventura got into politics and became governor of Minnesota. There are multiple examples of this kind of occurrence, but these crossovers are rarely in the form of wrestling. Seeing professional wrestling presented in other forms of media is always a rare treat for fans. It is a cycle. Sometimes wrestling is a bigger thing in the eyes of pop culture, and sometimes it's a sideshow that people snicker at. But when professional wrestling is at a peak, a professional wrestler might show up in something totally unrelated to wrestling. Sometimes the productions are treating wrestling as a novelty, but it's a novelty that brings in viewers. Arsenio Hall would bring on professional wrestlers in character and talk to them like he would a normal guest. There have been a plethora of sitcoms over the years to have an episode about professional wrestling. With this comes a few guest appearances and plenty of hijinks. Hulk Hogan would show up everywhere. Macho Man Randy Savage was the spokesperson for Slim Jim Jerky for years. The biggest honor to most television nerds would go to Bret the Hitman Hart, who actually appeared on an episode of The Simpsons. A bunch of WCW wrestlers appeared on Baywatch during that show's peak run. In the 1990s, the Attitude Era made it really easy to be an open fan of professional wrestling. A slew of wrestlers from that time would show up and participate in Fear Factor, a gross-out television show that was popular in the early 2000s. Wrestlers have also appeared on Family Feud in a few different eras. Others would go on to participate in an episode of The Weakest Link. Triple H would appear on The Drew Carey Show as Triple H. Lita was on Dark Angel. Stone Cold Steve Austin was on Nash Bridges. The Rock would even host Saturday Night Live before taking over Hollywood to help promote WrestleMania 2000. John Cena has shown up on Hannah Montana. These appearances are a lot of fun for the wrestling fan. Being a fan of professional wrestling and getting to see Vader on Boy Meets World was just all kinds of awesome. The ever so silly world of professional wrestling is definitely its own thing, so when that world spills into other things, it gives the outside world a glimpse of what it's all about. It's just a little moment where you feel like wrestling is being accepted, and it's okay to be a fan. Posters. Communication and expression comes in multiple forms. Audible expression comes in the form of speech, singing, and screams. Visual comes via artwork, printed text, video, and other mediums. One medium is posters. With lithography's late 1700s roots, this platform has had many years to develop. The first of these posters were called broadsides and featured marketing promotions and public announcements. A successful and purposeful poster is two things: informative and eye-catching. Moulin Rouge poster proved that it could be these two things, but also beautiful art. Posters would eventually be used for multiple reasons, including advertising a film, an album, or event. These posters would become collectible and treated like fine art because people would want to display them with pride. The demand and production process would both evolve. It wouldn't be long before people would have posters of their favorite cartoon characters, sports heroes, rock bands, and more covering their walls. There would be no reason that professional wrestling would not want their place on the walls of their fans. The earliest of wrestling posters were beautiful event promotions. These were informative pieces that let the viewers see when the show was, where it was being held, ticket prices, and touted the big matches intended to draw the interest of the fans. This would grow into full-on cinematic-looking designs to promote a pay-per-view. Pro wrestling posters do not end with the events. Like someone displaying their favorite sports stars, fans of wrestling also showcase their favorites. Some even take this one step further and get their posters signed, making them highly sought after memorabilia. It could be as simple as a great photographer snapping the perfect shot to blow up into poster form. It could be a promo shot with some additional graphic design. It could be a collage of wrestlers or photos. It could even be fine art quality prints. Regardless of what the visual is, if wrestling fans want it and have no issue paying their hard-earned cash for it, you can rest assured that it is being printed at this very moment. Sacrifice. It is where passion and perseverance meet, and then takes the strenuous steps towards reaching one's goal. Sacrifice is not a fly-by-night donation of time, effort, or funds. It's difficult. It's tough. It's something one must do for whatever the reasons are. Soldiers sacrifice their time, and sadly sometimes their lives, to defend their country. Every day, parents sacrifice for the better of their children. A business owner will do whatever they have to do to make sure their business succeeds, or even just stays afloat. Athletes will often play through their injuries in pursuit of reaching their goals. If one has passion for anything, it's not surprising that we push our limits to do what we feel is needed. Professional wrestlers are no stranger to sacrifice. The physicality of professional wrestling is nothing to joke about. These performers are taking large tolls on their body with every single bump they take. This leads to injuries they work through when they can, regardless of what it does to their long-term health. This leads to being forced to get multiple surgeries in order to be able to do what they love. This leads to addiction to painkillers and alcohol to mask the pain. The wrestlers who love what they do, want to achieve, and need to keep supporting their family, keep going. Like a touring rock star, wrestlers spend a large chunk of their life on the road away from their family and home. Ultimately, children grow up without their parents. And sadly, due to all these factors, the lives of some of our favorite performers are cut short. Their legacies live on forever. We can turn on old matches or share memories with fellow fans. But for those outside of the professional wrestling bubble, it would be hard to imagine that this kind of sacrifice being had over something like a professional wrestling performance. Realistically, professional wrestling is often a mere blip on the radar to most people. But to those who love the art form, it can be everything. Some performers might not be our favorites, but that respect should always be there. These wrestlers are chasing the glory of their best days and constantly reaching for the brass ring. The sacrifice they make, going through hell and back to entertain us fans, should never be taken for granted. Comedy. Comedy is defined as a genre that consists of humorous discourse. The goal is amusement and laughter. It's in literature, theater, and other types of performance art. For every witty satire piece that's in a book, there's a Weird Al doing a comedic song. For every stuffy politician using a joke to break the ice, there are iconic stand-up comedians who have made arenas erupt in laughter. It's been said that comedy pushes the line of tragedy. If it bends, it's funny. If it breaks, it's tragic. If someone trips and falls in a comedic manner, it can be hilarious. If they get badly hurt, it's not so hilarious, especially if we're the one doing the falling. That's just life. It deals us many ups and downs. Some of it is just funny. The giggles of a baby is music to the ears, but a baby crying is unsettling. Someone being overly confident and failing is fun for those watching the ego trip take a bad turn. Comedy is more than a genre of storytelling. It's life. Professional wrestling encompasses all aspects of life in one way or another. Comedy is definitely an element that has its place. There are a wide variety of different personas in wrestling that are all trying to stand out and be remembered by the viewers. One character type that has had stellar results is the comedy wrestler. These silly gimmicks bring a smile to the face of the crowd and have had success on different levels over the different eras of wrestling. Gorgeous George was so obscure that people had no choice but to laugh. Andy Kaufman's crazy interactions with Jerry Lawler in Memphis was hilarious. It goes on and on. It could be pushing the taboos of sex like Goldust, Val Venus, or sexual chocolate, Mark Henry. Others like Santina Marella, R-Truth, Hurricane Helms, and more just use silly cartoon-like tropes to become and remain beloved by the audience. Manager/commentator legend Bobby the Brain Heenan was always a hated heel, but it was hard not to laugh at his many great one-liners. And it's not just the characters. Some cut sarcastic or humorous promos to amuse the crowds, but their ring work is nothing to laugh about. These are your Rocks, New Days, Edge and Christians, Chris Jericho's, Booker T's, and D-Generation X's. There are also the moments that make viewers cackle. Mick Foley pulling a sock from his pants to assist in his matches. Stone Cold Steve Austin's interactions with Vince McMahon. There is this and a lot more examples of a bad guy getting his comeuppance. Like McMahon, The Miz, Ric Flair, and other over-the-top egos have rightfully seen themselves the butt of many jokes. The miscues and mistakes also bring that joy, as was the debut of the Shockmaster. He was supposed to come through a wall like the Kool-Aid Man, but fell down in the process. Scott Steiner and Sid Vicious have unintentionally made people laugh with their poorly thought out promos. When it's well done, it works. When it's genuinely funny, it works. Yes, professional wrestling is a brutal display of athletic competition. It's not always going to be a laugh riot, but to deny comedy's place in professional wrestling would be, well, it'd be laughable. Anything can happen. We experience many things during our time here on Earth, but most days are spent in the mundane, everyday nonsense. We go to school, we go to work, we come home, we sleep, we interact with family and friends, we rinse and repeat. David Byrne said it best, "How did I get here?" Thankfully, this is broken up with hobbies, passions, and distractions. Thankfully, we choose our own reality. We get lost in religion, sports, or other forms of ritual. It's how we wind down from the trials and tribulations of life. And the best shock to the system is when something out of the ordinary happens. This spontaneous magic could be our favorite sports team getting the big win, getting excited for a new movie release, or even just finding an abandoned dollar bill on the sidewalk. That is the beauty of life. Excitement and escape can come from anywhere and can happen at any time. This happens every day in professional wrestling. At its core, professional wrestling is a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Wrestling is Santa Claus, a chance to live in a childlike gaze. Wrestling is a riddle, something to constantly try to figure out. Wrestling is art. The performances are awe-inspiring feats with a beautiful story told in the ring. Wrestling is an escape, a chance to disconnect from our day-to-day lives and just indulge. Wrestling is a community. We have the good family members and those we prefer to avoid. Wrestling is life, lived and breathed from generation to generation. Wrestling is literally everything. This is why when Vince McMahon would scream, "Anything can happen in the World Wrestling Federation," we, the fans of professional wrestling, believed him. It was a slogan for the WWF in the 1990s, but it's true about all of professional wrestling. Anything can and will happen. Wrestling, when treated the way it should be, is a blank canvas, ready to be covered with as much obscurity as possible. Crazy surprise wins can easily happen on any given night. Surprise appearances can lift you to your feet in excitement. The top of pop culture has shown up from Hollywood and the music industry. And on the contrary, Muppets, RoboCop, Chucky the Doll, and zombies have made their presence felt. Our heroes can finally achieve their goals, and it means something, because we've been there every step of the way. We laugh, we cry, we cheer, we boo, and we experience all the realms of emotion thanks to wrestling. Ultimately, professional wrestling is a dream come true. Year to year, month to month, and day to day, we delve into the landscape of wrestling. We could have a horrible day at school, work, or home, but professional wrestling is always there. We could have the best day of our lives, and professional wrestling is there to share in the moments. Wrestling is friendship, community, and love when it's not always there in the real world. It's catching the wind of a superhero's cape. It's overcoming struggles of someone we can relate to. It's the feeling of someone else's shoes for an experience outside of our norm. At its core, professional wrestling is a culture of hope. We anticipate the results going the way we'd like them to go. Sometimes this is simply a wrestler getting the world title. It could also be wanting to see the bad guy get their just deserves. It may be wanting to see the best athletes square off in a match rated 5 stars by a fellow fan. We're not always going to see our favorites win, but as the great David Lee Roth proclaimed, it's not whether you win or lose. It's how good you looked doing it. That's why we buy tickets and tune in. We, as a collective community, share in the anticipation. Professional wrestling fans all choose our own reality. The depth of a wrestling fan's knowledge of the business is now a self-restrained perspective thanks to the internet. We can be simple and pure, wide-eyed, innocent fans, cheering on our favorites and booing the ones we hate. Or we can dive deep and debate over television ratings and shout from the mountains about the promoter's decisions. of course, most of us are somewhere in between. Regardless, we are a family of fans. We speak our own language and all have strong opinions of what has, is, and will be presented. This is not a construct that is fit for everyone. Some people just don't get it and never will. But when you do, it's genuinely a magnificent piece of one's life. Essentially, when it's all said and done, a wrestling show is a room of people surrounding a square with 3 ropes to engage in the athletic theatrics, as told by some of the best artists, performers, and athletes in the world. This and everything in between is part of the magic, and it's always there exactly when you need it. There are many, many reasons to love professional wrestling.